Welcome to LifePoint Institute's School of Discipleship. My name is Ryan Garrett, and today I will be talking on Session 4 in How Should We Live. Today I want to walk us through a familiar commandment that unfortunately I believe that we have all broken. When we think about the 10 Commandments, it's easy to think that we haven't broken rules like thou shalt not murder, or thou shalt not commit adultery, or we haven't stolen anything. Those are very, very noble things, but there's one of these commandments that I believe that we have all broken. And in fact, I've broken it, you've broken it, and I know that we have all broken it. And it is found in Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. It says this, "Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you." Now, wherever you are right now, you maybe feel a little conviction knowing that you have broken that. I do. When I read that, I feel that conviction. And when we think about the 10 Commandments, the first commandment is the foundation for the first table of the law, that is how we relate to God. Then the fifth commandment is the foundation for the second table and how we relate to one another. And in this session, I would like to speak to three distinct observations found in this commandment. Number one, God's design for the family structure. Number two, defining honor. I'm going to define that and we'll break that down. And number three, what the fifth commandment teaches us in overall authority in our lives. So let's first take a look at the family structure. God mentions two people here in this text, father and mother. The obvious assumption is that if we are to honor these specific people, then God is speaking to the children of these specific people. It's important to note that the natural family mentioned here is because it stresses the importance of mother and father. Let me share some staggering statistics found by recent studies about the state of families in the United States. The U.S. likes to be number one in everything across the world. And in the United States, we unfortunately lead the world in single-family households at 23%. The U.S. Census Bureau states that over 18.5 million children in the U.S. live with a single mother or a single father. Pew Research finds that, again, almost 23% of children in the U.S. under the age of 18 live with one parent and no other adult, which is the highest in the entire world. U.S. figures of children in a single-parent household are more than 3 times the number of children around the world under similar living arrangements. The Harvard Gazette said in 2020 that half of all children in the U.S. live with a single parent, and that 1 in 3 children spends time living with an extended relative. Needless to say, the natural family in the United States is declining rapidly against God's design found at the beginning of creation. If the enemy's number one goal is to divide, he will start at home with mom and dad. And then it will trickle down throughout the rest of the family. So God was serious when He speaks to not only this commandment about honoring your father and mother and who is mentioned in that commandment, but also the seventh commandment that thou shalt not commit adultery. I mean, the family unit is very important to God. So before we can talk about children honoring his or her parents, we have to talk about the importance of parents and the role they play in the home. Fathers. The role of fatherhood is the second most important role you will play in life. Number one will be the husband to your wife. Number two is to be the father of your home. And in that is the most important thing that you can do. So the importance of fathers, the responsibility of leadership given by God to fathers is a massive role. And it was designed for you. And in that, I find that there are 3 things that fatherhood and as fathers should take under the mantle of leadership. Number one, being encouragement. Paul speaks to the family, specifically fathers, in Colossians 3. And consequently, he just quotes this commandment. He says this, "Wives, submit to your husbands as it is fitting to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives. Do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. You may have heard the word exasperate used in that last verse, provoke or exasperate. Exasperate and provoke are very similar. They both point to the same thing, which is to stimulate to the point of wrath or anger. Fathers must father their children, not from a standpoint of wrath, yet from a standpoint of love and encouragement. Paul speaks to fathers again in Ephesians, saying that fathers do not provoke your children to anger. Again, he mentions it again, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. And so fathers, you don't have just the role of encouragement, there's also the role of discipline. Godly discipline shapes the heart of children to love obedience and to hate rebellion. Discipline and correction teaches children that sin brings pain and obedience brings flourishing. God disciplines those He loves. And the way that we parent our children speaks to how they will grow and how they will grow up to understand and receive God's discipline in their lives. David Lloyd-Jones says this: when you're disciplining a child, you should have first controlled yourself. What right have you to say to your child that he needs discipline when you obviously need it yourself? So the roles of encouragement, the roles of encouragement and discipline are so important, but that leads us to the third point of a father, is to bring instruction in and through God. Children should not have to learn holiness. Listen, children should not have to learn holiness and godly living through anyone else's life. It's the father's responsibility to teach these things to his children fervently and often. We'll talk about that in our third session. Unfortunately, culture says that fathers are the dumb ones. If you watch any shows, they're the stupid ones who make all the mistakes and say the dumb things, and they're kind of mindless. They can't do anything on their own, and they can't do anything right. Dads must take up the mantle of responsibility and lead the way that God has designed them. And we see that here. If fathers are to be honored, there must be an example and a responsibility to lead. And that first and foremost is lead them straight to the feet of God. Mothers, you're not off the hook either. You're a part of this verse as well. Mothers, you play the role of a godly mother in the fact that you're a foundational key to the natural family unit working correctly. Motherhood is a blessing, and in that, godly mothers are to understand their role in the family unit. And how do you understand that role? Well, I see three ways in that. Number one, submission. Now, submission is not used in a negative connotation here. Wives that are submitted to their husbands show a picture of Christ's submission to the Father. Not held down and made to do something, yet willfully following the lead. Wives submitting to their husbands is not saying that wives are inferior or show lesser value. Yet a woman's first role in the family is to be a wife, and then to be a mother if God so chooses. Under that submission also comes nurturing. Tony Merida says this about nurturing mothers. I love it. It seems God has given women a wonderful nurturing instinct. I don't mean to imply that men can't be nurturers, nor that women are the only nurturers. However, the fact that women can give birth and feed and nurture babies and children in ways that men cannot highlights the beautiful uniqueness women possess as caregivers. Most men do not have the gift of nurturing. Although it's important for fathers to love on and encourage their children, but this portion of a portion of mother's role that God has given them, designed specifically for women. Nurturing mothers provide a place of support, affection, and unconditional love. But it's not just those two things that we find one more. Teaching and training is a part of a mother's role in the family unit. As Paul was writing his last letter to Timothy, found in Scripture, to his young protege, he reminded him to fan into the flame of the gift of God given to him by his mother, Eunice, and his grandmother, Lois. Notice there was no father mentioned here. There's two women that were important in the growth of Timothy's life and the spiritual growth of Timothy's life. The role of training for a mother in the home is to rear their children to find the gifts, the talents, the strengths, the weaknesses that God has given their precious children, allowing the children to follow her example. Now, mothers and fathers, your children will never obey. They will never obey until they begin to follow Jesus. And that's something from a standpoint of the heart. They may try to do things right, or they may come from an act of obedience, but it will not come out of the overflow of what God is doing in their hearts because of they do not have Jesus in their lives. So that is so imperative, is so important that fathers and mothers pour Jesus into their family. And when the child's heart transforms to Christ, that's when they will want to obey. Not because they get anything out of it, not because they find that it's a cause and effect. It's because they do it out of the overflow of their love for God. And how do they learn that? They learn that from mothers and fathers. Your child's greatest problem isn't that they don't honor you, but the child's greatest problem is that they don't honor Christ. And once that is in order, the rest will fall right into place. And if fathers and mothers want their children to honor them, we must give our children a picture of the gospel that honors our Heavenly Father first and foremost. Men and women who are parents, it's important to not neglect the fact that before you are a spouse, before you are a parent, you are a son or daughter of God first. How will your children ever learn to honor God if you do not honor the Lord? Men and women, moms and dads, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And if you note, the fifth commandment would have been found in the second table of the Ten Commandments. First four deal with our loving connection with God. The second, our loving connection with others. And loving our neighbor, as Jesus was talking about the two greatest, loving our neighbor starts with loving our neighbors first, loving the people underneath our roofs. As fathers and mothers give an example of honoring God with their lives, your children should have every opportunity to honor you. And we'll cover that, what honor looks like, in our next section.